if you're focused exclusively on that target and the deadline, then that translates ultimately into failure. Okay, I set a target, I didn't reach it, I'm going to fail. Okay, you constantly set targets and new deadlines, you don't reach it, you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. When you build that up over 3 or 4 years, that can really, really knock your confidence. And so, focusing over here on the outcome, when you don't know how you're going to get there, can be extremely damaging. So a healthier way to deal with it is to focus on the point of failure, because this is where you can have an effect. This is the only place where you can have an effect. Because a PhD takes so long, what you do on a day-to-day basis, what you do today, is not going to have a massive impact on the final outcome. So if you're constantly focused on over there, then you'll always be frustrated because it's so incremental to the process, the progress. But if you focus here, you can have an impact. If you focus on the problem at hand, figure out what's happening, that's where you can apply your skills, and that's where you can have a significant impact on your chances of success or failure. So the defining factor for success is not how well you plan, not how organized you are, it's how you respond when things aren't going to plan, which will be the determining factor. Okay, point number 4. So, I know that this is going to be a little bit of a controversial point, but I'll try and explain it as carefully as I can. A PhD is not intrinsically stressful by nature. A lot of people think it is, just because a lot of people go through stress. But, I'll give an example, a slightly different example. So, if you're clinging to a rock face, you're several meters off the ground. If you're not a rock climber, you'll find that stressful. Okay? You'll be afraid of falling to your death, obviously. And your heart rate will be racing, you'll tense up, you'll be sweating, really, really quite a scary thing. But if you are an experienced climber, you'll respond in a different way, because you'll be used to it. You might still experience fear, but you'll be able to control it, you'll be able to use your skill to get yourself out of that situation. And so, what this means is it's not the situation which is stressful by nature. It's a personal reaction to the circumstances. The stress doesn't come from the circumstances. If you see a PhD as just being stressful by nature, that's just the way it is. You have to go through the stress, you have to suffer in order to succeed. Then there's nothing you can do about it. Stress is just normal, and you'll ignore it as just being part of the process. And some people even will see stress as like a badge of honor. I'm so much more stressed than you are, I'm working so much harder, my supervisor is so much worse than yours, my research is going worse than yours. People cling on to that. But what it means is you're actually ignoring the root causes of the stress, which is extremely damaging and stops you from doing your best possible work. So you don't just have to accept stress as part of your normal everyday existence. Instead, you should see it as a signal that something isn't right and you should do something a little bit differently. So, your mental resources are the most valuable asset that you have. Are there any psychologists in the room? Nobody? Okay, good. So I'll get away with this. So your mental capacity is your most valuable resource, but it's also a limited resource. Now, when you have something which is easy, something which you don't even need to think about, so walking, for example, you learned to walk when you were very, very young. It's so ingrained that even though it's a very complex process, you don't need to think carefully before you take every little step. And it's so easy that you can easily have a conversation and walk around at the same time. It doesn't take up any concentration whatsoever, no conscious concentration. But if you make it more difficult somehow, then it starts to take up conscious effort and concentration. So for example, if I set up a wooden beam, maybe this wide, meter off the ground, so obviously that's going to be more difficult. I don't want to fall over in front of a large crowd, so I'm going to be concentrating. And because it takes up concentration, suddenly, if I try and have a conversation at the same time, that becomes more difficult. And the reason is that this reserve of conscious effort and concentration is limited. There's only a limited number of things that you can concentrate at any one time. So if you start to treat your mental reserves as unlimited, really bad things can happen. And if you try and take on too much, which is beyond the skill level that you have, then what you end up with is overloading. Okay? If you stretch your mental reserves too far. And this is the root cause of stress. So, for example, okay, so just a quick summary of that point. When you need to work it close to your full mental capacity, as you often will when doing a PhD, the slightest distraction can drastically reduce your ability. Okay? So if you've got multiple things using up that reserve, then even things which are within your ability can then take you into that range where it's overloading. Okay. So what if we add some kind of external motivation? So often what people try to do when feeling stressed is add something on top to make you work harder, to make you more motivated. You know, if you can't concentrate on something, then provide an incentive, and that'll make it okay. But going back to the example, if I'm trying to walk on a beam, if I concentrate, I'll probably be able to do it. But the key thing is that if I'm just walking on a beam, for the sake of learning the skill, then there's no major consequences if I get it wrong. If I fall off, I'll probably be all right if it's not too high. Okay, so I'm okay to make mistakes, and that means that I'll try, and it means that if I fall off once, I try again, improve. But if you change the significance of success or failure, it drastically changes my ability to perform a task. So if, for example, even if you provide a positive reward, so let's say somebody's going to give me $1 million if I can make it from this end of the room to the door. Okay? When you do that, what should be a positive motivating factor suddenly makes me really afraid to make a mistake. Because missing out on that positive incentive becomes a negative thing. So it'll make me hesitant. I'm not going to be able to improve my skill, and it makes it more difficult because that thought of the reward or the negative consequences of failure is also taking up part of my mental reserves. So the same thing happens with your PhD. If you're afraid of failing, then that reduces the amount of your mental reserve that you can spend on the problem, and makes you hesitant